It's a common opinion that generals spend hostilities, wars, sheltered in the rear, maybe sipping a whiskey or tea, smoking a pipe. They send the soldiers forward into the trenches or onto the battlefields, and they stay sheltered, calm, at ease, waiting for the outcome. If things go well, they show up on the battlefield and have themselves immortalized for the success. If things go badly, they're the first to run away and save themselves. Many people think so, but that's incorrect. It doesn't always happen like that. Generals are not always or exclusively executioners who send other people to die. Generals are sometimes on the front lines with their men. They fight with them, suffer with them, get wounded with them, and can die with them. This is the story of a battle and two generals. It's the story of a terrifying retreat, of a trap, a deadly trap, and of how to get out of that trap. It required a sacrifice. This is the story of the Battle of Nikolaevka, or T. They send soldiers into trenches or battlefields while they remain safe, calm, and comfortable, waiting for the outcome. If things go well, they show up on the battlefield and have themselves immortalized for the success. If things go badly, they're the first to run away and save themselves. We're in Russia in January 1943, and the date should already tell you something. We partially talked about it in the video dedicated to the siege of Stalingrad. You can find it on the channel. January 1943. World War II is turning in the Pacific. The Japanese offensive has stopped. In fact, the Japanese are starting to go on the defensive in Africa, but in Africa as well. We've already talked about this in the Rome trilogy. Things are not going well in Africa. Things are not going well for the Italian Germans, who were defeated at the Second Battle of El Alamein and are in retreat. By now, they have lost not only their bases in Egypt, but all of Libya. And they are retreating into Tunisia and to the east, into the Soviet Union. Things are going badly for us there too, because during the breakthrough of the front along the Volga line, the Romanian armies that surrender and flee isolate the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad, but we've discussed this already. But that collapse, that sudden collapse when victory seems within reach, when Paulus is just a step away from taking Stalingrad, yes, that collapse, it is destined to generate a long chain of events like a domino effect. It's not only the Germans and their Romanian allies in the Soviet Union, in the north as well. There are the Finns who have made a new pact with Germany to also take revenge against the Soviets, with whom they fought in the Winter War of 39-40. Then there are the Hungarians, loyal allies of Hitler. There's even a division of Spanish volunteers, the Blue Division. Spain is not officially at war, but Francisco Franco, also as a sort of gesture of goodwill towards his fellow dictators, has given them free rein, so that a truly volunteer division can leave for the Soviet Union and fight alongside their German and Italian comrades. And of course, there are Italians who have been in the Soviet Union since the start of Operation Barbarossa. It's initially with the 11th Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia called Sepice. It's a corps based on the old motorized corps, a large unit put together by combining the motorized divisions and the Littorio Division, one of the first and few Italian armored divisions. It's an expeditionary corps that, however, shows its great limitations, because the Italian divisions are motor transportable, not motorized. It means that there aren't enough vehicles for everyone, that the divisional vehicles have to go back and forth, and that often you have to walk a lot to actually reach the destination. And then there's even a fast division, which is a cavalry division, that will become the protagonist of the last real episode of cavalry. Not in a figurative sense, but in a tactical sense of the Second World War. The charge of Spusheski When the Italian cavalrymen literally charge the Soviets, it's a victory, the one at Spushesky. But it's also the swan song of a weapon, that of the cavalry, now outdated and destined to be overturned by the prevailing mechanization. The KSIR fights for almost a year, fighting while obviously showing its own limitations, even though most of the best equipment is sent right to Russia. Mussolini wants to make a good impression, and he also wants to rebalance the relationship with Hitler. Hitler intervened heavily in Africa to aid Italian forces and acted forcefully in the Mediterranean, first to help the Royal Navy, then to prevent the Royal Army from meeting a bad end after the assault on Greece, and so he invaded Yugoslavia. Mussolini is eager, in fact, to restore the balance of power in the field of ideals, if not to equality, at least to a more favorable equilibrium. That's why he insists on taking part in the Russian campaign, insists on sending men and materials. Hitler ultimately doesn't mind sending more men into battle. Of course, it would be better if the Italian troops were actually prepared for war. A long war, a war of movement, and a war that deals with some pretty serious unknowns. One of these is logistics. The Soviets use a very simple tactic, the scorched earth policy. They destroy everything that could be useful to the enemy. During their retreat, the Soviets devastate the depots, cities, and roads. All efforts aim to slow the Germans and their allies, and the tactic works. And when the first rains come with autumn, the roads of southern Ukraine and Russia turn into a quagmire. They call it Rasputitsa. It's a terrifying mud that seems to almost capture the wheels of vehicles and hold them there, trapped in the mire. There's no escape, even tracked vehicles struggle. It's meant to slow the advance. But it's not enough, Nixer. It can't be enough. If the Germans keep sending reserves east, even Mussolini knows that more forces are needed. Not only that, there's a plan. It's called Fall Orient, which means Eastern Plan. It's a very ambitious plan from the Oberkommando of the Wehrmacht. It foresees, since they weren't able to break through towards Moscow, aiming south towards the Caucasus. Why the Caucasus? Well, first of all, the Caucasus is the gateway to the Middle East, towards Iraq, which tried to rebel against the British, towards Iran, which was invaded by the Soviets and the British, ousting Shah Reza Khan and placing the oil wells under their control. The Caucasus, especially the area of Azerbaijan, and then towards the south. Iran and Iraq are oil-rich regions. They're the oil lifeline for the Allies, at least until the United States enters the war. To take Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, with its oil wells away from the Soviets, and to take Iran, the oil wells of Isfahan, and Iraq away from the British. It means stopping, perhaps forever, the mechanized forces of both the British and their allies, as well as the Soviets. So the conquest of the Caucasus becomes a strategic objective. This is when Italy sees a great opportunity, the chance to put the experience of its Alpine troops to use. So a new expeditionary corps is sent. In fact, even more than that. An army becomes Italian Army in Russia. The Italian Army in Russia, always with these acronyms. The XIR becomes part of the Italian Army in Russia with what remains, seeing its troops with the reserves. But the Italian Army in Russia is organized differently. It has an entire Alpine Army Corps based on 3 divisions. The Julia, the Tridentina. Some of them are the pride of the Royal Army's mountain troops. Soldiers trained to fight at high altitudes in all weather conditions. They even send the Alpine skiers to show Hitler that the Italian soldier has gained valuable experience in the mountains. And it could be an ace up their sleeve to win the war, but those soldiers, those Alpini, will never see the Caucasus. They will never see it. Because the German offensive, as we have seen, stalls in front of Stalingrad. Stalingrad is a steel shutter that Paulus's 6th Army cannot break through. The Italian troops do not participate in the assault on Stalingrad. They are kept in reserve on the northern area of the deployment. They are positioned in a defensive setup along the course of a river called the Dold. Yes, as priests are often called in Italy. The Don becomes a defensive line, the northern defensive line. Then there's the northeastern defensive line, mainly held by the Romanians, the 6th Army at Stalingrad. And to the south, there are still Romanians and Hungarians. Everything is fine until November 1942. The Italians have taken their positions using the usual old methods, strong points, trenches, and observation posts. They practice occasionally with minor skirmishes and raids, but nothing serious. The Italians, moreover, as Mario Rigonister and Giulio Badeschi recall in their books, they have a chance to see how the equipment they are supplied with, which should be the best of Italian industry, is insufficient and clearly lacking compared to Soviet and especially German military equipment. When new anti-tank bombs or new weapons to fight Soviet tanks are sent and tested, maybe against the wreckage of some previously destroyed Soviet tank, well, only one thing happens. Those armors are impenetrable, both for our bombs and our anti-tank rifles. All wasted iron. But let's get back to the battle formation. The Soviets isolate Stalingrad. They manage to break the encirclement of their troops, making the Romanians flee to the north and south. Stalingrad is isolated. The Germans repeatedly try to break the siege but fail. The Italians are not asked to contribute. They are not asked to lend a hand to help their German comrades. From this perspective, they're not important. It's better they keep guarding the defensive area along the Don axis. Everything's fine and in order. Up to a certain point, because between mid-December and the beginning of January 1943, new attacks occurred, increasingly intense. And this time, they concern the Armir sector itself. 2 different attacks force the Armir to retreat. It's a retreat that becomes a rout, since the Italians, as mentioned, aren't motorized. The Alpine troops are on foot. They can only rely on mules, which poor animals can only endure up to a certain temperature. The winter is harsh, and we complain when Mercury colony's temperature falls below 0. Imagine troops sent to fight thousands of kilometers away from home, with shoes with cardboard soles without any clothing, really effective against the cold, and forced to march in the snow with temperatures between 30 and 40. Below 0, yes, you heard right, between 30 and 40 degrees below 0, polar temperatures. Anyone who stops in the snow is truly lost, not because they won't be found, but because they're destined to die. Even the mules die there from cold and exhaustion. They just can't go on. Occasionally, a soldier leaves the column, pauses in the snow, then falls and never rises again. The columns are occasionally harassed by the Soviets, who are always there watching, sometimes attacking, to test the strength of the retreating troops. The Yulia and Kunince disappear. Soon only a handful from those divisions will return. Things are better for the Tridentina back home. The Tridentina is marching quickly and has managed to preserve most of its forces. To the west, toward safety, there is a city along the way. It's marked on the maps, and it's called Nikolayevka. According to the directions, it should be a stop and supply point before the final march west. Most of the commanders don't know that the information is wrong. Not about whether the city exists or not, the city does exist, but about whether it's a place to rest. The Soviets got there first. They understood the intentions of the retreating Italians before anyone else, and they headed straight for Nikolayevka. They occupied it and blocked escape routes, and they intend to turn that city into a hell, into a place to bury the last fleeing Italians. The Italian troops realize this upon reaching Nikolayevka, which isn't safe. You can already hear the roar of the cannons, the crackle of rifle fire in the air. You can see the fires, the smoke. It's a city that's burning. When the Italian columns arrive, there's not even time to stop and regroup. There's already fighting to be done. One after another, the units that survive the rout have to take up arms and face the Soviets. The officers notice it too. Even the other officers notice it. For example, a general named Riverberry, Luigi Riverberry. He's from Emilia. The commander of the Tridentina, he called a meeting with his officers to figure out how to act, what to do, where to break through. He evaluates how many weapons are there, who's with the Tridentina. It's complicated. Some scattered Germans have also joined the column. There are a few artillery units. They're trying to organize everything together. With General Riverberry, there's another general among them. He was promoted just a few months ago. He used to be a colonel. Now he's a brigadier general. His name is Giulio Martinat. He's from Piedmont, and he's the chief of staff of the Alpine Army Corps. Neither Riverberry nor Martinat have any illusions. They've realized what kind of mousetrap they've gotten themselves and all their men into, and there's only one way to get out of there. Fighting furiously, fighting if necessary, even with hand-to-hand weapons. The old-fashioned way. One after another, the units are sent to fight, one after another. The assaults begin, house by house, street by street. Major Enrico Bracchi sends his men to attack, leads them personally. Then other battalions strike, and one after another, they fall. The soldiers can't make it. They find themselves facing extremely determined troops, well armed, even equipped with winter uniforms, and with the absolute determination not to let the enemy through. In the late afternoon, the Edolo Battalion, part of the 5th Regiment, arrives as the final battalion. And when the Edolo arrives, the meeting between the officers ends, and they take stock of the latest situation. What do they have available? The last reinforcements have arrived with the Edolo. With them, there is also a battery of German self-propelled guns. There are only a few stooges that can help, and they need to break through. It's the only way to avoid everyone being massacred. The meeting, as mentioned, ends, and the officers decide to personally lead the final assault. Riverberry climbs onto one of the stooges, standing right on the armored structure, points to the soldiers where to go, and then says, "Forward, boys, Italy's that way. Forward, let's fight." And this is how his men break through, because they keep charging more and more. They attack the Soviets, fix bayonets, and fight hand-to-hand toward the exit from Nikolayevka. L'Edolo also arrived in good condition, and recognizing L'Edolo's soldiers is Giulio Martirat himself, who began his military career. Inside the L'Edolo, Martirat recognized the insignia of the corps. When he sees his former boys, he tells the other officers, "Gentlemen, I'm joining them. I began with the L'Edolo and want to finish with it." It is Martinat who orders the Alpini to fix bayonets and attack. He also uses the same words as Riverberry. "Forward, boys. Italy is over there. Let's attack." Martinat leads as many as 3 assaults. The first goes well. In the second, he gets 2 wounds, and in the third, wounded almost all over his body, he collapses. He dies along with 39 officers and 3,000 Alpini. Among them is a sergeant just 22 years old. His name is Raul Achilli. He is a sergeant major of the 50th Company of the battalion, Edolo. He is wounded several times like Martinat, once in the arm, once in the leg, once in the side, and once in the head. Unconcerned. He keeps fighting, he keeps leading his squad because he knows that whoever stops is truly lost. Achilli dies in the final decisive assault, sacrificing himself along with many others. Some Italians manage to make it. They come out of the hell of Nikolayevka. They basically make it out on their own feet. They manage to see a light at the end of the tunnel to get out of that infernal cauldron. There are 6,000 survivors of the Matarza. Few, really very few. I'll just leave you with a few figures. On January 16, 1943, the Alpine Army Corps receives the retreat order. The Malta Corps has over 61,000 men. After Nikolayevka, only about 13,000 men remain from all 3 divisions. You do the math, that's really few. About 40,000 die in the snow. Frozen, frostbitten, missing. Many are captured. Some will never return home. Others suffer frostbite on their arms and legs. They return home without feeling in their hands or feet. Few of the wounded manage to return home by train. It's a massacre for the Alpini in Russia, a massacre that reaches its peak in the Battle of Nikolayevka, a battle in which Raul Achilli, Giulio Martinat, and many other Alpini die. A battle Luigi Riverberry survives. He, on the other hand, manages to return home, manages to return to Italy, and will also have a role in the post-war period. A long memory remains of that battle, a very long memory. A memory that passes through the books of Badeschi and Mario Rigoni Stern, through theatrical works, through cinema, and television. I don't know how many of you have seen the film The Comrade Don Camillo. In one scene of that film, one of the Emilian communists, Brusco, traveling together with Pepone and the others in the Soviet Union. At a certain point, he separates from the main group and goes into a field in search of his brother's grave. He had promised his mother that he would leave a lit candle on his brother's grave. He will never find it because now, instead of that grave, there is a wheat field. In that case, Don Camillo, played by the French actor Fernando, reminds him that after all, the Soviet Union lost millions of men during the war. He couldn't care about a few thousand fallen soldiers that the enemy had left in his country. But that wheat field perhaps represented the best message for a future to be rebuilt. From the death of so many young men sent there to fight, to suffer from cold and hunger, and to die from the cold, from frostbite, or from bullets or explosions. From those deaths came a wheat field, and from that wheat, bread to nourish new lives. It's the cyclical nature of human existence and also the tragedy of war. More than 80 years after the Battle of Nikolayevka, we still remember Giulio Martinat, Raoul Achille, and others. We do it, yes, for their heroism, yes, for their spirit of sacrifice, but also to remember that often and willingly. It's not so much the generals who decide wars, it's the politicians, and they do. They do it in safety, in comfort, sipping a coffee, a whiskey, a tea, drinking whatever they want, eating well, smoking a cigar rather than a pipe, unconcerned about what happens far away from them, because after all, they don't fight the war, they decide it.
Thank you all. Thank you all.